And Nancy, if you don't mind, since there's such a small group, is it okay if people want to unmute themselves and just say, hey, I have a question, and just kind of interrupt us? Just because sometimes when we share screen, it may be kind of hard to see the chat light up. So I think with a small group, I'm cool with if anyone wants to just chime in. Unmute
Yeah,
themselves. Is that cool?
that's perfect.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, well, kind of like what Sprint said just a minute ago, him and I we've co-presented this presentation for adults and youth alike. And today we're just going to kind of give the quick 30-minute version of our presentation that we created back in late 2019. You know, the CDC was coming out with a lot of data, and they were talking about how vaping wasn't really all it was chalked up to be. You know, when I first heard about vaping was probably in around 2009, 2010. The first e-cigarette that I found was the blue cigarette. It was the kind of looked like a pen like this. It was black and it had like a blue tip on it. And I remember seeing somebody when I worked at Walgreens at the time vaping inside the building. And I said, sir, you can't smoke in here. This is 2009, 2010. We don't smoke in public. And he said, no, it's cool, man. It's a vape. And at the time I was like, okay, you know, we don't have a policy for this. I don't know what's in this thing. And I don't know the dangers of it or if it's socially acceptable or not. And I remember it was probably around 2013, 2012, I started really seeing this surge in people vaping, whether to get off cigarettes or to just try something different. And you know, it was really marketed as being something a little bit safer or a lot safer or harm-free than traditional cigarettes. So in this presentation, we kind of just want to explore that, some of that lie that we've kind of been fed.
And I think too, Nancy, that I presented to you guys at the very beginning. I think kind of when I first started here in 2018, I presented to you guys, and this is a version of that. We're still using some of those slides, but as Tyler aforementioned, we keep upgrading. So we just keep trying to upgrade the slides and the presentation itself. So it's we've done a lot in the last few years as far as just putting new slides and getting new info and kind of trying to catch up on everything. So I don't know if you remember that at the housing building, Nancy, way back when. Okay.
I do, yes.
Yeah. Okay. We can get started though. Basically, Sprint Williams again. But how did we get here? So in the early 20th century, the cigarette rolling machine was invented. I know probably a lot of people don't know what that is, but that's how everything kind of got started a long time ago. Many physicians and the general public did not recognize harms of cigarettes. And so, because back then, 30s, 40s, it just, there was not enough info. There wasn't anything. And so people just thought this is the new thing. This is the cool thing coming out. And anything you watch back then really had it on there. And here's just a couple little things from Campbell and Philip Morris. They don't get your wind, play safe with your throat. There's just a couple little gimmicks that they tried to show here.
Kind of like their catchphrases.
Yeah.
Their advertising sales points.
And how did they create the want? So just as anything would be, now we have social media and a lot of different things, but there was a lot of shows and different things that really enhanced and really glamorized the way that people used cigarettes and the way people smoked and how cool it was. This is a Mad Men episode, obviously, but there's a lot of there's a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of smoking. And people see that, kids see that. They think it's cool. They think it's, hey, this is safe. Number one thing, it's safe. And if somebody like an actor or somebody in Hollywood is doing it, then it's got to be okay. And so that's kind of where it started. We can run to the next one if you want. And then we'll go into some more advertisements here. And even if you look, just look at some of these advertisements that we found. This is way back when, and it's somebody. This would never happen today, but it's people holding up cigarettes. There's a physician down here saying Luckies are less irritating. There's people that are eating dinner that used to smoke. Again, it's glamorized, and it really is. at the forefront as back then what it was and what people saw. And so to have a physician on there, we thought that was crazy. And so, but it's somebody saying that it's okay to smoke.
Yeah, and it was really just associated, I think, too, with wealth. I mean, you see people doing some fine dining here, and I think people were encouraged to smoke between meals because they claim that it helped with digestion. And you see somebody on a boat, and yeah, it was just it seemed like Sprint, they did everything they could just to get people to smoke cigarettes. And we'll talk more about how many people were smoking back in those days. But what are some things that changed? I mean, where did we go from using famous people like Lucille Ball to advertise for Philip Morris, or when did we start using real or fake physicians to, kind of give their approval of cigarettes? Well, it wasn't until 1964 where the general surgeon released that report that connected smoking to lung and throat cancer, and also cardiovascular disease as well. Even though Philip Morris said that, it was pretty healthy for you. And then we started seeing a lot of policies and anti-smoking campaigns emerging during this time. There's a lot of power in policies. We have to have rules and regulations in how we tackle some of these issues. And then that's when we started to see this change in mindset. So when we started to see this change and started to understand that smoking was bad for us and that it wasn't all it was chalked up to be, that's when we started seeing things change in the tobacco industry. We started seeing less actors using cigarettes in television. And I remember at a young age, that was something that a lot of the anti-tobacco coalitions were really wanting to make sure was being removed from television, was a lot of actors using cigarettes just to get away from sort of normalizing cigarette smoke. We started seeing businesses change in, their smoking policies. We've done this at schools before, and we've had schools tell us that back when they were in school, so let's say 70s, maybe 60s, depending on when they were in school, that it was nothing for a teacher to go out in the hallway between classes and just start smoking in the hallway at the school, or go outside the smoke shack, right behind the school and smoke with the students. Like, that was normal. I mean, it was kind of a communal thing. And it's just, for me, I grew up, born in 1990, and that never occurred at my school. And I couldn't imagine a life where that was normal. We started seeing cigarette prices increase. That made it harder for teens to buy. And then we started seeing cessation programs become available. So for people who were smoking, there were resources on how to help people, kick the habit. And of course, we started seeing education and prevention efforts take place as well. So with Sprint's program, with 1-800-QUIT-NOW, with a really cool website called Truth, they really advocate and provide information, infographics, resources for people who may be struggling with cigarette smoke or vaping.
And kind of a look at where are we now, we've decreased so much over the years, mostly due to information and people just kind of making the right choice and knowing that the health concerns that come with cigarette smoking. So as you can see before, in less around 1965 or so, 42%, which is now down to 8.8%. And part of that is, of course, people just having the knowledge and gaining all the information and trying to make themselves better and stay healthy. And the other part too, sadly, is the vaping part. So vaping has increased so much that, especially within the youth, that it's so much easier to conceal that people are smoking less. As far as youth go, that's kind of what we've saw. If you're under 25, a lot of times you'll see people vaping a lot more than you would say somebody that's been smoking for 20 years. They're not necessarily reaching for the vape as often as a youth, and so that's credited to some of the decrease, but a lot of it is people just trying to make the healthy decision and knowing more about the health concerns.
Hey, Sprint, is that surge there for the youth? Is that due to like vaping products?
That looks like it's a little before the vaping really came around 2010, 2008, somewhere in there, where it really started to hit mainstream. So, um, uh, can you elaborate a little bit on the increase? I don't think we've talked too much about that, Tyler.
Oh, you're talking about that big jump
Yeah.
with youth? I think a lot of it may have to do also with I think they started surveying more youth during that time, because if you look at that big surge, the youth behavioral survey, that was from 95, 2017, and that's kind of right before 2000. So I think that's when they really started asking those questions about. So they had kind of a general idea using the NHIS here. So they had some like general data, but it was really when they started doing that youth risk assessment, that's when they really started seeing. So when you start asking those questions and you start seeing that increase there, so that's what.
Yeah, and a lot of times it is due to updated surveys. So it's new data that's came up. And I was in high school at that time. Actually, I was in high school 96 to 99. So there was a lot of people that smoked. We could go off campus during lunch, and that's just what a lot of people did. I was kind of too young and naive and immature to even think about it, but there was a lot of people that did, especially in that era.
Right, because I mean, we know that youth have been smoking. You know, we know that there were youth smoking in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
You know, just that those surveys weren't really capturing that data, I think, for the youth at that time. All right. So what is an e-cigarette? So this is where I will ask some of you. So right here, I wish there was kind of a way to, let's just do this right here. This one right here. What is this? And that was a perfect circle, by the way. What is this device called right here? You can unmute your mic if you know what it is. Does anyone have any guesses what that is?
Yes.
Yeah, let me guess. I'm gonna go with the Jewel.
You are correct, Chris. That is a Juul.
Isn't that a flash drive?
Is that a flash drive? Definitely looks like one. So Juul was really one of the more popular ones. It's kind of lost its popularity, and the reason why it has is because Juul was under a lot of fire a couple years ago for their flavors. So right now, the only two flavors that I've seen personally for the past few months or even past year have been tobacco and menthol. But Juul was the more popular one. There's about 1 million different vaping devices. I mean, there's going to be a Juul type device that looks like a Juul but isn't, trademarked as a Juul. That's going to have a lot of different flavors, but Juul specifically, because it was so popular, was really under fire, and that's what was popular. This one right here, you can probably see from the name, this is the blue. So this is the one that I was talking about earlier. See this? It's kind of like a pin. It's basically just kind of a fake like black cigarette with a blue tip right here on the top. These are more of your disposables that you'll see. So a lot of these, you buy them. These are going to run you about $10 a pop. These you take out of the package and you immediately start vaping. These right here are kind of like the Juul. With these Juuls, you can recharge this device right here. This is what powers your device. This right here is called the pod. This is where the juice and the nicotine is. This right here is another popular one right here in the middle. This one is called an Enjoy. Very similar to the Juul. You charge up the battery, but you can also change out those pods and you can just be replacing those. All right, moving on right here. What is that one usually referred to as? This is the one when we ask youth what it is. They don't want to tell us because they think they're going to get in trouble. Does anyone know what that is?
Is that the Dabinoid right there? Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah, dab pen. Yeah, that's the dab pen or vape pen. A lot of people will use this. It's a little bit smaller, less bulky than, let's say, these mods down here. But, a lot of people will use this for either THC liquid or just like nicotine vaping juice. Yeah, so this is a pretty popular one here. And this right here, most of us have probably seen this. If you ever around somebody and you just see this huge smoke cloud just bellowing in the air, or you drive behind somebody and you see all the smoke come out of their window, it looks like their engine's on fire. Chances are they're using this mod system here. These are pretty popular. A lot of people like these because this right here is called your tank, and it's where you fill up the juices. But a lot of people can customize these where they can make their own coils, which powers it up, which fires up heats up the liquid and then releases the vape. These are the ones that have exploded on people because they've tried making their own devices, and they were cranking up the voltage, because on some of these you can actually change like the wattage and the volts and all that stuff. So it got a little out of hand. But these are some of the more popular type vaping devices that you might see people using. So let's go over a quick vaping history here. So the first e-cigarette was actually first commercially introduced in 2003. And it was created by this pharmacist by the name of Han. And he wanted to create this device that provided the like smoke kind of feeling and sensation after his father had passed away from lung cancer. So his father was a heavy smoker. So Han's intentions was, well, if people are going to smoke, maybe there's a way I can create a healthier device so people don't have to lose a father or lose somebody in their life or pass away themselves to lung cancer. So those were Han's intentions. And it took a few years for the e-cigarette to really pick up steam, no pun intended. But once it did, it really took off. And again, looking back, I don't know, when are some of the, if you had to guess, what was maybe the year where you first maybe saw an e-cigarette? So for me, it was like 2010, 2011. But what about for you all? Can you kind of think of a time where you were like, oh, what is that thing?
I would say probably 04, 05 for me. I remember seeing somebody
04.
with the blue light one, and I had to
Oh,
go
really?
investigate, like, what is that? I remember going to them and asking
Right.
them what it was and what they were doing. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was in high school at the time, and I never saw any of that at my high school. At our high school, it was cigarettes and weed and drinking, but never saw these cigarettes. So I guess it took a while for the youth to kind of catch on with it, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was totally not in high school. I was a grown adult. So
Uh,
I think I
Walter,
was
this,
in college. I think I was in college when I first heard about. I think like I don't even know I don't even know if it was called vaping back then. I don't remember it being called vaping, but I think it was just like e-cigarettes. And I think I was in Telequal. I was at NSU then, and I remember hearing about it. I was just like, "Oh, that's weird."
Yeah.
That's all I thought about it.
Yeah.
yeah, and I remember whenever I went to NSU, I didn't ever really see any of that stuff. There were people who did traditional cigarettes, even really up until I left around 2014, 2015. It just wasn't really popular. I mean, it didn't seem very popular. I don't know. But I didn't really see that. It was mostly traditional cigarettes and dip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd be curious to see different parts of the country to see if it picked up a little bit earlier than us. I don't know how big, because I know dipping's pretty big here in Oklahoma. So maybe that's just like a country thing. I don't know how many people would be dipping in, let's say, California or like New York. I'm just not sure. So I don't know. So I'd be curious to see if it picked up a little bit earlier in other parts of the country as well.
Tyler?
Yes.
I've lived in Washington State and Florida as well.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, tobacco use is pretty well even from coast to coast.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. You got down in the South, you have heavy smokeless tobacco use
Mm.
with younger country kids down there.
Mhm.
Up in the Washington area, there's a lot of actually smoking, cigarette smoking,
Mm.
because Washington and around Seattle and all had a higher depression rate.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard about that in Seattle. A lot of it too is the
Mhm.
weather, I would assume, right? The seasonal effect
Oh
of this.
yes, it's very gloomy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It rains 9 months of the year, right? Like that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
That'd be pretty tough.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah. You typically to even get some sunshine, you had to go to a tanning bed. So.
oh, wow.
wow, crazy.
Yeah, so for the e-cigarette to really for the trend to really pick up and for anything to pick up steam or to pick up sales, you have to use advertisement, and we use that because it works. And Sprint's going to talk a little bit more about what some of that advertisement looks like for e-cigarettes.
Yeah, and just like we talked about before, way back when in the 50s and 60s and whatnot, and with the Mad Men and different things and how they kind of advertised it and they glamorized it. If you look at these, you just look at a few of these little advertisements, and one of the things that really points out that we kind of saw was everyone in this little group is cool. Like it's really, and it's not, as Han was talking about, how to get somebody to kind of wean off and to find a healthy alternative. This is more, look how cool these people are. I mean, you got the guy to the far left. He's dressed up. He's pretty GQ. You got the woman and the other guy up here, and they're in the now or the in or whatever. And the woman at the bottom too is just kind of having fun. And so if you look at it, everybody is seems to be really just okay with it, having fun. It looks like a good time. And if you're a youth, if you're somebody that's young, if you're 12, 13 years old, however old you may be, and you see things like this, it may not get everybody, but it's going to get some of them, and they're really going to think, hey, this is cool, and look at this. And so that's what the industry is always going to do. It's always going to be whatever's new, whatever comes out, that they can try to market and make money off of. They're going to. And unfortunately, with the vape, it's the youth that's targeted an awful lot. If you look at this is a slide we had that has the e-cigarette use among youth rising as advertisement grows. And if you look at it, the more money being spent is actually helping the vaping industry and helping them put money in their pocket and market these things. So just as everyone, the internet basically knows how old you are due to things you look at and whatnot. So all of social media kind of is different for everybody. So like my Instagram page is going to be different than Tyler's, and my Nancy, yours is going to be different than Tyler's. Everyone's going to have a little different. Like where mine might say start having investment stuff come up, or you need to think about doing this with your money, blah blah blah. If you're a younger person in your early 20s or even younger than that, you're going to get ads that come up that are going to be the Juul ads, or they're going to be the Enjoy ads, or kind of whatever the new thing is with vaping. And so you're going to start to see some of those pop up while you're scrolling. And I really don't get those a lot, because they're not targeting somebody that's 40 years old. They're targeting, kids that are younger, that are, 14 to 25, somewhere in there. And so, but by doing that and by using that market, the increase is going to keep increasing. And that's just the sad part of it. But that's more of the target audience is the youth. And as we look, we spoke a little bit about Juul before. This is a little bit of an older slide, but it's a good slide. It increased in popularity, shaped like a flash drive that we said. And kids are using it all the time. So it's so easy to go to a bathroom, to hide yourself in a classroom, and to just use it and then be done with it. I mean, if you look at some of the older movies, Dazed and Confused, I don't know if everyone's seen it. It was made in 1993, but it took place back in '76, and that's when my dad was graduated. But 1976, all these people are in the bathrooms and they're all smoking. They're all like really smoking. So if you take that and you move it up 45 years to now, that's vaping going on in the bathroom now. That's not cigarette smoke necessarily, because it's easy to conceal. It doesn't stay with you. You know, if you vape a couple times, then you go back to the classroom, no one's going to know. As opposed to if you smoke a cigarette, everyone knows when you come back in. You know, it's just on you. It just stays with you, and you can smell it wherever. And so, and that's kind of the big reason for the vape and the concealment part of it.
I somehow like jumped back to like 15 slides. Hold on. I just like swiped my pad. I don't know how that went back. Were you finished with this slide, Sprint? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
Awesome.
I know we're crunched for time a little bit.
Gotcha. Really quick, what Sprint mentioned was the brain and how addictive it is. Really, the thing about the teen brain and why, if you talk to a lot of smokers who've been smoking for multiple years, you'll probably hear them say, like, I started when I was like before the age of 25, right? And that's why it's been so hard for them to quit, because their brain, when your brain is still developing, it's wired for addiction, right? The brain is increasing it creates those nicotine receptors. So the more and more nicotine that somebody has into their system, the more nicotine receptors that it creates, which ergo creates that addiction more and more. It makes it harder for people to quit. In a nutshell, how nicotine works, it activates those brain receptors, and those receptors release what's called dopamine, which is that feel-good thing that we have, right? We have this whenever we eat a really good meal. We have dopamine it releases. And like I mentioned earlier, the more that we smoke or vape or really have any kind of nicotine in our system, the more those nicotine receptors are created. So you'll hear why people, typically when people start smoking, they never start smoking a pack a day on day one. It's usually smoke a cigarette here, and then before I know it, I'm up to maybe 2 a day, 3 a day, and then I'm moving up to, well, I'm not bumming cigarettes off people anymore. I'm actually buying my own packs, and maybe I'm smoking a pack a day. And it's because that threshold for that chase that a lot of people are going for, that head change, it's that threshold goes higher and higher and higher. So people need more in their system. And then of course it becomes a habit. So let's talk about what's really in an e-cigarette. We know that most e-cigarettes contain nicotine. Now there are some e-liquids that are nicotine free. However, those are still going to contain those chemicals such as propylene glycol, glycerin, other flavorings, and other chemicals as well. Diacetol is one that's really scary. If you guys heard about the popcorn lung that a lot of people were talking about a few years ago, popcorn lung, that comes from diacetol, which is linked to some of those buttery flavors. Diacetol is found, it's basically like an artificial butter flavor, which it hasn't been linked to be bad for you if you eat it, but if you inhale it in your lungs, then that's where it can be bad. Metals such as lead is found in a lot of the liquids. So sometimes there's very small microscopic pieces of lead or metal that when you vape it, creates kind of little tiny holes in your lungs, so you get that nicotine in there. And then other cancer-causing chemicals. These are some ways that youth are concealing their vape. A lot of students may go to the bathroom. They may put in their backpacks. There's actually backpacks that have little attachment, little hoses where you can vape and then blow it into that backpack. And there's hoodies that you can hook your vape device up to your hoodie, and you actually use the little drawstring on it to vape from that, and you can just kind of blow it in your hoodie. So a lot of people are able to do this. Pins that actually write. We actually have that pictured here if you can see that. It's a pin, and if you see the little button kind of in the middle, that's the power button that activates it. If you take off the cap, you've got your mouthpiece there. So it's a lot harder to conceal. And there's also been cell phone cases. So I've seen cases where it's just a typical cell phone case, but it has like a little mouthpiece on it too. And you can fill up your juice and you can just vape. And I think it pulls the power from your phone to power it up. So a lot of different ways that they are vaping now.
And this says, but isn't vaping safer? And that's the $1 million question everybody always asks, and that's kind of what's been portrayed a lot. Nicotine is found in most e-cigs, very addictive, affects brain development, lung disease over 1,000, some resulting in death, and researchers do not know the long-term effects quite yet. However, the FDA has not declared e-cigs as a healthy alternative, and what that basically means is that there's just not enough information. There's not enough information on vaping. It hasn't been out long enough. You realize how long it took for the cigarette smoking to really meet at the forefront and be like, well, this is really bad for you. And so vaping, they're kind of doing the same thing. We're trying to collect enough data. We're trying to collect enough info, but there isn't enough right now to say that it's safe at all. Because what we do know is that you're still getting that nicotine, and a lot of times it's so easy to just hit a vape all day. I mean, if someone is at work and where they can kind of hide that, or they would allow that, then somebody could just vape all day if they wanted to, and just hit that pen all day. Where you couldn't just smoke all day. You'd have to go outside, you'd have to take a break, you have to do these things. And so the amount of nicotine you're getting each time from a vape can be very harmful to you. And we've seen kind of, I think Tyler mentioned the explosion on one of them, is a lot of times, just like anything else, no one's really a certified chemist or anything at times, but you'll get people that think, oh, I can make this vape. I can go into the garage and I can, make my vape and I can sell it to people. And, a lot of times in the bigger cities, they're going to try to sell it to the youth, the people that can't get it themselves. And so that's where we're finding some of the black market vapes that are exploding and the kids are getting their hands on because they don't know any better, basically. And so, like I said, the info is not there yet. And so we just don't know, but it hasn't been declared healthy, and it's not regulated or anything. So we're still collecting data on the vape. And real quick,
I have a question.
go ahead.
Sorry. So you said it's not regulated, so there are no like FDA regulations on it or anything, or is it like limited? Do you know?
Well, what I meant is they just haven't declared it healthy, like the CDC and FDA, and they haven't said, hey, just kind of as it's advertised, oh, this is healthy, like you can do this, and it won't harm you. They can't say that, basically. So they know that vaping is still harmful, and it's still full of nicotine, and it isn't something that they consider a safe alternative.
I think this one's you, Sprint.
Yeah. And real quick, we'll touch on the COVID-19 in vaping. We know that vaping damages the lungs, lowers the lungs' immune system. And then we did a one study, and the study was actually at Stanford University, where they took, I think it was 2,000. Stanford University had 2,000 people, and that had all had COVID before, and they basically followed them and kind of looked at the people that smoked or vaped as opposed to the ones that didn't. And the people that smoked and vaped were actually got 2.4 times more sick, and some of them actually resulted in death. So with COVID-19 and it being a respiratory illness, the people that vaped and smoked really had a hard time trying to get over it and trying to get back on their feet and whatnot. And so their sickness usually lasted longer, and that's usually done from your immune system being down, your walls being down. And so that's what's happened. And Stanford University conducted a great survey that we checked out, and like I said, more than 2 times the people that had smoked or vaped were that much more sick than people who didn't.
All right. So let's say that, just to kind of start wrapping up, let's say you have a youth in your life that, maybe you were going through the room, or you smelled something fruity on them and you asked what that was, and you found out that they're actually vaping, and maybe they have been vaping for a while. And let's say you want to have that conversation about, with your youth about vaping. First and foremost, it's important to always be open-minded when you're having these conversations. You know, if we can kind of put ourselves back in in our shoes when we were teenagers, you know, if we ever felt like attacked by our parents, or if we didn't feel supported, or if we felt judged, well, we're probably least likely to open up about some of the reasons why we were vaping in the first place, or smoking cigarettes, or doing whatever it was that we were doing. So I always encourage parents or adults or mentors or whoever just to be as open-minded as possible. Again, when you're putting yourself in their shoes, you know, in hindsight, when we were teenagers, it was probably pretty difficult. We're going through a lot of life changes. We're starting to get this idea of who we're going to be after we graduate. I was always told when I was in high school that the high school years were the best years of my life and I should enjoy them. They actually were pretty rough. They were probably some of the worst years of my life. And, you know, I understood why a lot of students, you know, use nicotine or alcohol or marijuana as this way to kind of cope with that stuff. And I always want to make sure we're being calm and relaxed and have a clear understanding of, you know, what we're wanting to get out of this conversation that we have with our youth. And ultimately address that why. It's really asking that question, why did you decide to start vaping in the first place? What are some of the reasons why? Was it peer pressure? Are you having a hard time coping? Is it depression, anxiety? Is there something that I can do better to support you to figure out what we can do to find a healthier coping skill that doesn't involve vaping, that doesn't involve harming your body? And some more resources. There's a couple. One that's really cool is kind of an extension of the 1-800-QUIT NOW number. It's called My Life, My Quit. This is a resource for youth ages 13 to 17. And this is great because there wasn't a lot of resources for youth. You know, to buy nicotine replacement therapy, you still have to be 18 years old. So for those youth that were under 18, you know, what's out there for them? So they have some online coaching here. There is, and this is for not only just vaping, but tobacco and nicotine as well. It's free and confidential. For youth to get started, they can just text Start My Quit at 36072. And they can start kind of their quit plan with somebody that works for 1-800-QUIT NOW. And there's also like a live chat feature on the website as well. And that website is ok.mylifemyquit.org. They've got all kinds of stuff. They have resources for how to quit. They talk to you about what are those withdrawals going to feel like? What are some things that you can expect? You know, and they don't really sugarcoat it. You know, when you decide to quit vaping, you're going to feel pretty anxious and probably depressed and angry and irritable for about a week or so. And you'll have cravings for sure. But they coach you through that.
Yeah, and an extension of that, 1-800-QUIT NOW, which came up with My Life, My Quit, but it's still always there. It's the Oklahoma Tobacco Helpline. Has resources to quit vaping, also to quit smoking. It has facts about vaping, and you can sign up for the website. So it's pretty easy. You just go on there, look at it, and they actually have people that they will, like, if say you're working and you're pretty busy during the day, that they can call you in the evening time if that's better, to try to help you kind of when your cravings are the worst. So if you say, well, I'm off work at 5 and I eat around 6, and you know that's when I always smoke, or this or that, and they'll kind of coach you and help you out, and then they can call you during that time and try to help you with the cravings.
And that's going to conclude our presentation. Does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered or didn't cover? By the way, one of Juul's replacements is called Bitty Stix. They look very similar to the Juuls. They're actually disposable. I don't think they make a Bitty stick that you can charge up and buy. So they're the daily. They're called dailies basically, but they're just disposable e-cigarettes. But those are
they're really cheap and easy to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what are they, like $5 to $10 maybe?
Something like that. I know my my daughter's friends, I saw them when I was looking in her car, or she had me look at her car for something. I saw a couple in there. I was like, "What's this?" And she said, "Oh, those aren't mine." But you know, I'm sure they are. But they're pretty easy to get. I mean, she's gonna be 19, but they're pretty easy to get. So I know it's
Yeah.
happening.